Today is a little more complicated than lesson 11.1. Instead of just having one fraction, you will have two fractions, and you'll be either multiplying or dividing depending on what the problem asks you to do. So I will begin with one that's a little more complicated because the first few ones are actually pretty easy. I'm going to start with number 17. So as I rewrite this problem off to the side, I will be factoring when I can. So the fraction on the left, the numerator is 4c, so I will begin by putting 4c. I could put 2 times 2c, but I'm going to leave it as is for now. The denominator of that fraction is 2c plus 2. Well, that has a GCF of 2, so I'm going to pull out a 2. So 2 times the quantity of c plus 1. So it's looking like I probably should have changed the 4c into 2 times 2c, but I can take care of that later. My fraction on the right, the denominator is c minus 1, so I'm just going to write c minus 1 because there's nothing I can do with that. And my numerator is c squared plus 3c plus 2. So remember, when we factor something that is a trinomial, we start at the back if we can and hope that we have a prime number, and we do. 2 is prime, and that can be broken down into 1 and 2. So 1 times 2. And if I add the numbers together, I get 3. So that gives me the 3c that's in the middle. And now I look, and this is basically one big fraction, so it's okay if you look someplace else to find something in common. So if I look at my parentheses, my factors that are in parentheses, I see a c plus 1 in the numerator and denominator, and so I can cancel those out. I also have this 4c could be the 2 times 2c that I referenced earlier, and then these 2's cancel out and simplify. I made a big old mess out of what I have, but I can still see that I have 2c in the numerator. I see that I have a c plus 2 in the numerator. And what I have left on the bottom, or the denominator, is c minus 1. If you were to check this in the back of the book, I believe they want you to multiply the numerator back out. I don't need you to do that. I'm perfectly fine with you leaving it like this. I actually prefer it like that. But if you were to check this one in the back of the book, it probably has 2c squared plus 4c as the numerator and c minus 1 as the denominator. Let's do another multiplication one that's a little more complicated and actually only has one fraction in it, but I would hope you know by now how to make a fraction out of anything that's not a fraction. So I'm going to finish with 27 as the last multiplication example. So I'm going to start the same way I did on the previous example. H minus 1 in the numerator will remain h minus 1. Can't do anything with that. The denominator is 6h plus 3. Well, that has a GCF of 3, so I will factor out a 3 and then divide and get 2h plus 1. Notice there's nothing at all that I can do right now. If this was only this one fraction in the problem, I couldn't simplify this problem, but I do have more. And because this is not a fraction, you should know that you can put a 1 on the bottom of it for its denominator, and now it is a fraction. So I am going to put a 1 over here on the bottom. The numerator, unfortunately, is one that has something in front of your h squared at the front. So I'm going to try to break this down. And if you remember when we learned these before, I always suggested you start wherever the prime number is. So what I just circled, the 2h squared, that is prime. So that's where I'm going to start. You can break down 2 into 2 times 1. So that would be 2h times 1h. Everything in my problem is positive, so I know I have to have pluses. And then the 4 at the back of the problem, which I just put a box around, that could be 2 times 2, or it could be 4 times 1. Well, I'm looking for a 9 to be made, and I know 2 and 2 and 2 are not going to make a 9. But I do know that a 4 combined with a 2 plus another 1 will give me 9. So my 4 needs to go here because that'll give me 8. My 1 needs to go here because that will make a 1. And 8h, and 1h makes the 9h that I'm looking for. Now that I've done that, I can look to see what is common anywhere. I see 2 factors of 2h plus 1, so those simplify. I see an h minus 1 on the top, but nowhere on the bottom. I see an h plus 4 on the top, but nowhere on the bottom, which means there's nothing I can do further in this problem. So I would be left with the quantity of h minus 1 times the quantity of h plus 4, all divided by 3 times 1 is 3, so all divided by 3. Again, if you were to look in the back of the book, they probably multiplied the numerator out. So if you were to use FOIL or a box or the cover-up method or the shortcut method where you just multiply and subtract, you would get h squared. 4 minus 1 is 3, so you would get 3h in the middle. And negative 1 times 4 would be negative 4. So the back of the book most likely has h squared plus 3h minus 4, all divided by 3. My last example will be 41, which is now division. So if you're working on any problems that are in this section from 32 to 40, just realize that that is exactly the same type of problem that I'm about to do. It just looks a whole lot nicer when you start. But other than that, it's going to be the same. So 41 is very complicated. I'm going to start by pointing out that the numerator of that very funky looking fraction is a fraction in itself. So I'm going to just rewrite that fraction off to the right. It starts with 4b minus 1, and it's being divided by b squared plus 2b plus 1. Well, I don't want to write that down and waste my time and waste space on this page. So I'm going to factor that out. Looking at the back, it's a 1. The only way I can break down a 1 is 1 times 1. So I'm going to factor out the quantity of b plus 1 times the quantity of b plus 1. So now the numerator of the large fraction is already factored. That big division symbol right there, well, you can just rewrite that as a division symbol like that, like how you've probably first learned a division symbol. Hopefully you remember that when you're dividing fractions, you take the reciprocal. So instead of the numerator being on the top, that numerator is going to flip to the bottom, and the current denominator is going to flip to the top. So I'll start in the denominator, b squared minus 1. That is a difference of 2 squares. So that would be the quantity of b plus 1 times the quantity of b minus 1. The numerator is 12b minus 3, and that flips to the denominator. So my GCF would be 3. So I will factor out a 3, and that leaves me with 4b minus 1 when I divide. And once you have taken the reciprocal, hopefully you remember that it just turns into a multiplication symbol. So now your problem looks a whole lot like my first 2 examples. And I just begin to look to see what I have in common. So 4b minus 1 is in both of these spots. B plus 1 is in these spots. You also could have gone with this guy if you had wanted to. And what I have left in the numerator is b minus 1, and I don't see a b minus 1 anywhere in this problem on the bottom. So my final answer will be a numerator of b minus 1. And in the denominator, I have the 3, and I have a factor of b plus 1. This should be your final answer. Again, if you check the back of the book, it probably has something like b minus 1, all divided by 3b plus 3 if you were to distribute on the bottom.